Welcome back to Night Mode Lore. Tonight, we're settling into the shadows to explore one of Five Nights at Freddy's most enduring and terrifying figures. A character who has evolved, transformed, and returned again and again across more than a decade of games, books, and alternate realities. Through withered animatronic shells, digital nightmares, and burning resurrections, this entity has worn many faces while maintaining one constant truth buried at its core. The man who would not stay dead. The killer trapped in metal and malice. The rabbit that always comes back. In the quiet darkness where horror gaming's most persistent villain resides. Where the boundaries between man and machine dissolved long ago into something far more disturbing than either component alone. Springtrap stands as a monument to obsession, consequence, and the terrible price of refusing to accept death's finality. His story weaves through nearly every major entry in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, connecting the murders of 1985 to the digital corruption of modern times, linking past tragedies to future horrors in an unbroken chain of suffering and revenge. To understand Springtrap is to understand the franchise's darkest corners, its most complex mysteries, and its central theme that some evils are simply too persistent to destroy through conventional means. This is every version of Springtrap explained, from the original decaying horror discovered in Fazbear's Fright to the digital virus corrupting virtual reality, from the scorched resurrection beneath a mega pizzaplex to the variants that haunted augmented reality deliveries across the world. We'll trace the evolution of this iconic antagonist through each iteration, examining not just the surface changes, but the deeper lore implications, the design philosophies, the ongoing mysteries that continue to unfold even into 2025, and the cultural impact that transformed a video game villain into one of horror gaming's most recognized icons. Whether you're a long-time theorist seeking comprehensive coverage of every detail and debate, or simply letting these details drift through your mind as sleep approaches with the comfort of familiar horror lore washing over you like a gentle tide, this journey will illuminate every corner of Springtrap's twisted legacy across the franchise. We'll examine how a simple golden rabbit entertainer suite became a torture device, then a prison, then a vessel for undead consciousness, then code and virus, then something that exists simultaneously across multiple realities and forms. We'll explore the design evolution from Scott Cawthon's original rendering to Steel Wool Studios' modern interpretations, discussing why certain changes sparked controversy while others earned praise. We'll delve into the voice performances that gave William Afton personality beyond silent menace, transforming him from mysterious purple sprite into fully realized character with motivations, humor, and terrifying charisma. We'll analyze the gameplay mechanics that made each Springtrap encounter distinct, from FNAF 3's fluid predatory stalking, to Glitchtrap's psychological manipulation, to Burntrap's technological control. And we'll examine the ongoing debates about identity, consciousness, and authenticity that recent games have introduced, questioning whether we're still confronting William Afton or something that learned to wear his face so perfectly that the distinction became meaningless. So find your comfortable position. Adjust your volume to that perfect ambient level where my voice becomes background presence rather than focal point. And let's begin with where it all started, in a family diner where golden animatronics performed for children, where innovation and ambition mixed with resentment and cruelty, and where a man named William Afton first donned the Spring Bonnie suit that would eventually become both his weapon and his eternal prison. This is a story that spans decades, crosses technological boundaries, and refuses to end despite multiple attempted conclusions. Because just like its central character, this narrative always comes back. The birth of Spring Bonnie and the seeds of Springtrap. Before Springtrap existed as the nightmare we know today, there was Spring Bonnie, a golden yellow animatronic rabbit that represented innovation and entertainment at Fredbear's Family Diner during the 1970s and early 80s. Created alongside Fredbear as part of William Afton and Henry Emily's original restaurant venture, Spring Bonnie embodied the cutting edge of animatronic technology for its era. The suit utilized spring lock mechanisms, an ingenious yet inherently dangerous hybrid system that allowed the costume to function in two distinct modes. When the spring locks were wound tightly and properly secured, the internal animatronic components compressed, creating enough space for a human performer to wear the suit safely. When the locks released, those same components expanded outward, transforming the costume into a fully functional animatronic capable of autonomous movement and performance. This dual functionality made Spring Bonnie and Fredbear incredibly versatile for the growing entertainment business. During busy hours, employees could climb inside and interact directly with guests, providing a personal touch that purely mechanical animatronics couldn't match. During slower periods or scheduled performances, the suits could operate independently, saving labor costs while maintaining the restaurant's lively atmosphere. Phone Guy's training tapes from later Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations would reference these spring-lock suits with a mixture of nostalgia and foreboding, explaining the precise winding procedures and warning against any moisture exposure that could trigger catastrophic failure. The tapes emphasize that even condensation from breath or a few droplets of sweat could loosen the locks, causing the compressed animatronic parts to snap back into place with bone-crushing force. For William Afton, Spring Bonnie represented more than just a business asset or technological achievement. The suit became his preferred disguise, his hunting costume, the innocent facade behind which he committed unspeakable crimes. The missing children incident of 1985 saw Afton don the Spring Bonnie costume to lure victims into the safe room at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a sealed back room invisible to animatronic programming and security cameras. The Golden Rabbit would promise these children lost pets, special prizes, secret parties, anything to draw them away from safety and into isolation. Behind Spring Bonnie's friendly exterior, William Afton murdered at least 5 children, stuffing their bodies into the animatronic suits of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and eventually the mysterious Golden Freddy. The Spring Bonnie suit enabled Afton's crimes in multiple ways, beyond simple disguise. Children naturally trusted the familiar character from the stage performances and birthday parties. The suit's construction with its built-in animatronic components provided both the strength and concealment needed to physically overpower and hide victims. Most critically, the suit allowed Afton to move through the restaurant without attracting suspicion from staff or security systems. A man in a Spring Bonnie costume wandering the back hallways appeared entirely normal, just another day at Freddy's. This pattern would repeat throughout Afton's killing spree, with the yellow rabbit becoming synonymous with danger in the fading memories of the franchise's haunted locations. The original Spring Bonnie suit, assuming the one that would eventually become Springtrap, was indeed the same costume used in the murders, absorbed years of Afton's crimes. It witnessed deaths, contained his malicious intent, and became forever associated with the trauma inflicted on innocent souls. When multiple springlock failures at a sister location finally prompted Fazbear Entertainment to decommission the hybrid suits entirely, retiring them to sealed safe rooms across various locations. Spring Bonnie sat dormant in the darkness. The once bright yellow fabric slowly deteriorated. Moisture from leaking ceilings and poor ventilation weakened both the material and the internal mechanisms. Springs rusted. Fabric yellowed and tore. The suit waited in its sealed chamber, a relic of both innovation and horror, for the day its original wearer would return one final time. That return came sometime after 1993, when William Afton revisited the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, where he had committed the original murders. Whether driven by a desire to destroy evidence, extract remnant from the possessed animatronics, or simply compelled by some twisted nostalgia, Afton dismantled Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, freeing the spirits trapped within. Those spirits, the children he had murdered years before, manifested as apparitions and cornered their killer in the sealed safe room. Panicking, desperate for protection, Afton saw the deteriorating Spring Bonnie suit hanging against the wall. He climbed inside, perhaps believing the costume that had once made him feel invincible would shield him from supernatural vengeance. For a brief moment, hidden within the golden rabbit, Afton laughed at the ghosts. But then the room's moisture, accumulated rainwater dripping from the ceiling, touched the compromised spring locks. The mechanism failed catastrophically. Every compressed animatronic component snapped outward simultaneously, piercing Afton's body with metal beams, wires, and crossbeams. Spring locks punctured his organs, tore through muscles, and impaled him against the suit's internal structure. The death was not instantaneous but prolonged, agonizing, as Afton's blood mixed with rust and decay, while the suit's remaining automated systems attempted to complete their programmed functions. His screams filled the sealed room, unheard by anyone in the abandoned building. As he died, trapped within the very disguise he had used to kill others, William Afton's corpse became one with Spring Bonnie's structure, the boundaries between man and machine blurring in a grotesque fusion. But Afton did not pass on. Whether through remnant exposure from his previous experiments, the supernatural properties of the haunted location, or the sheer force of his refusal to die, something kept his consciousness tethered to the decaying Spring Bonnie suit. Over the following decades, sealed behind layers of plaster and forgotten in the building's layout, the fusion of William Afton's corpse and the Spring Bonnie animatronic slowly transformed into something new. Flesh decayed and mummified, metal oxidized, fabric rotted, and Springtrap was born in that darkness, waiting for rediscovery, embodying the franchise's central horror that some evils refuse to stay dead. The original Springtrap, 5 Nights at Freddy's 3 30 years after the Springlock failure sealed William Afton inside the Spring Bonnie suit. Entrepreneurs seeking to capitalize on the dark legends surrounding Freddy Fazbear's Pizza developed Fazbear's Fright, a horror attraction designed to exploit the franchise's notorious history. During their scavenging of the abandoned original location for authentic props and decorations, the attraction's employees made a discovery that would doom their venture before it even opened. Behind a sealed wall in a long-forgotten safe room, they found what they believed was a vintage animatronic in remarkable condition considering its age. The suit appeared damaged certainly, with visible tears and exposed wiring, but it was complete, authentic, and would serve as the perfect centerpiece for their horror attraction. They had no idea they were transporting a reanimated corpse. The original Springtrap, as he appeared in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, presented a nightmarish vision of decay and corruption. The once bright yellow Spring Bonnie suit had degraded into a sickly olive-green color with darker shading around the torso and inner ears. The original pigmentation oxidized and stained by time, moisture, and bodily fluids. The suit was extensively damaged with multiple tears revealing the animatronic endoskeleton beneath, though these tears also exposed something far more disturbing. William Afton's mummified corpse remained visible inside the suit, his decayed flesh wrapped around metal bars, organs and muscle tissue visible through gaps in the costume. The head tilted at an unnatural angle, one of Spring Bonnie's ears completely torn away while the other hung loosely. Wires dangled from the arms and legs where the fabric had deteriorated completely. Most disturbing were the eyes. Where Spring Bonnie once had friendly, cartoonish eyes appropriate for entertaining children, Springtrap's eyes reflected human anatomy. The eyeballs, shrunken and desiccated but recognizably organic, peered out from the costume sockets, their gaze possessing an intelligence and awareness that purely mechanical animatronics lacked. The teeth, too, crossed the line between animatronic and human, with Afton's skull visible behind the suit's damaged lower jaw, creating an unsettling double layer of teeth that seemed to shift between mechanical performance and genuine predatory intent. The right hand had lost several finger coverings, exposing bare endoskeleton digits alongside cloth-covered ones, while both feet were completely stripped of their costume elements, revealing the mechanical structure that William Afton's legs had become fused with during the Springlock failure. Throughout Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Springtrap stalked the halls of Fazbear's Fright as the only true threat to the player. While phantom animatronics appeared throughout each night, these apparitions could only jump scare and disable systems. They couldn't end the game. Springtrap alone posed a genuine danger, moving through the building with an unsettling fluidity that distinguished him from previous animatronics. Where earlier antagonists moved with jerky, mechanical precision, Springtrap's movements appeared more organic, almost human in their smoothness. He would peek around corners, slide into doorways, and shamble toward the security office with a gait that suggested the consciousness trapped inside remembered how to move as a human being, even while piloting a decayed animatronic body. The phantom animatronics that accompanied Springtrap through each night appeared connected to his presence, perhaps manifestations of the guilt and trauma surrounding William Afton's crimes. Phantom Freddy, Phantom Chica, Phantom Foxy, Phantom Balloon Boy, Phantom Puppet, and Phantom Mangle all bore a greenish, burned appearance, as if filtered through the lens of Springtrap's corrupted perception. Their appearances would temporarily disable audio, camera systems, or ventilation, forcing the player into increasingly vulnerable positions. When the ventilation failed and the office filled with phantom hallucinations, Springtrap's approach became nearly impossible to track. Multiple ghostly versions of him appearing on cameras, while the real Springtrap closed in for the kill. Players could attempt to lure Springtrap away from the office, using audio devices scattered throughout the building, recordings of children's voices that would draw him toward specific rooms. This mechanic took on a sinister dimension given the lore. Springtrap still responding to the sounds of children decades after using similar lures for murder. He would also enter the ventilation system, crawling through ducts toward the office, requiring players to seal vents and reboot audio systems while tracking his position. The tension built across each night as Springtrap learned the environment, his movement patterns becoming more efficient and aggressive. By the fifth night and the subsequent nightmare mode, Springtrap moved with such speed and intelligence that players had only seconds to react to his position changes. His jump scare delivered one of the franchise's most visceral attacks. Springtrap would lunge toward the camera, his decayed rabbit head filling the screen as his jaw unhinged wider than any animatronic mouth reasonably should, revealing the layers of mechanical teeth and human skull beneath. The scream that accompanied this jump scare mixed mechanical distortion with something organic and agonized, a sound that suggested consciousness and awareness rather than programmed response. That scream would haunt players' nightmares, a reminder that this wasn't just a malfunctioning machine, but something far worse. On the fifth night, Phone Dude discovered Springtrap in the building and informed the player of strange noises and movement. The security guard, implied by many to be Michael Afton searching for his father, survived each night despite Springtrap's relentless pursuit. But survival came at a cost. By the end of the week, whether through sabotage, accident, or deliberate plan, Fazbear's fright burned to the ground. Newspaper clippings shown after completing the game reported the fire consuming most of the attraction, destroying vintage animatronic parts and memorabilia. However, a brightened version of the newspaper revealed a disturbing detail in its accompanying image. In the corner, barely visible among a pile of salvaged items, Springtrap's head could be seen, suggesting he had somehow survived the flames. This survival cemented Springtrap's reputation in the fandom. William Afton had survived Springlock impalement, 30 years of entombment, and now a direct inferno specifically designed to contain and destroy him. The message was clear and would echo throughout subsequent games. Afton always comes back. No matter how thoroughly destroyed, how completely buried, how decisively defeated, William Afton and the Springtrap form housing his consciousness refused final death. The fire that should have ended his story merely served as a transition point, burning away the last vestiges of Spring Bonnie's original appearance and setting the stage for his next grotesque evolution. The original Springtrap established several thematic elements that would define William Afton's character throughout the franchise. His association with fire and burning became central to multiple attempts to destroy him. His predatory movement and behavior toward night guards, especially if those guards represented his own son, demonstrated that even in death, Afton remained driven by violence and vengeance. The visible corruption of his body, the fusion of organic decay with mechanical components, created a physical manifestation of his moral rot and refusal to accept death's finality. And his connection to the phantom animatronics, ghostly echoes of his victims and crimes, suggested that even in his undead state, the weight of his murders haunted him. Springtrap from Five Nights at Freddy's 3 became iconic, not just for his design, but for what he represented. This was the first time players confronted William Afton directly, face to decaying face, rather than through purple sprite representations or implied presence. This was the monster behind the murders given physical form. And that form was a rotting corpse piloting a broken rabbit costume, a perfect encapsulation of how Afton's ambitions and crimes had corrupted everything he touched, even transforming his own body into a prison of suffering. Yet still he persisted. Trapped in agony but refusing release, a horror that transcended simple jump scares to touch something deeper about obsession, guilt, and the terrible price of refusing to let go. Scraptrap, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. When Springtrap resurfaced in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the damage from Fazbear's Fright's fire had radically altered his appearance. Known to fans as Scraptrap, a nickname the community adopted, though the game itself refers to him simply as William Afton. In the completion ending credits, this iteration presented a dramatic redesign that sparked significant controversy among the fan base. Where the original Springtrap maintained recognizable elements of Spring Bonnie's design despite the decay, Scraptrap appeared to have undergone fundamental changes that challenged continuity and design philosophy. His proportions shifted dramatically. The head enlarged significantly, earning the unfortunate nickname Peanut Head due to its distinctive elongated shape. The lower jaw completely disappeared, replaced by a more exposed view of William Afton's skull, serving as the functional jaw, with more teeth than anatomically reasonable, creating an unsettling overbite. The most striking change involved the suit's remaining coverage. While the original Springtrap showed extensive damage with visible corpse elements, Scraptrap had even less of the Spring Bonnie costume intact. The entire torso region was almost completely stripped, revealing William Afton's mummified ribcage, spine, and internal organs in disturbing detail. The suit's color scheme shifted too, with less greenish tint and more brown tones mixed with dirty white where fabric remained. His right hand maintained bone fingers rather than mechanical or fabric-covered ones, suggesting either regrowth of organic material or fusion of existing skeletal remains into functional digits. The left arm ended in a more standard endoskeleton hand. One foot retained some costume elements, while the other appeared as bare endoskeleton, creating an asymmetrical appearance that added to his ramshackle aesthetic. Perhaps most notably, Scraptrap's ears changed entirely. The left ear became more angular and mechanical looking, while the right ear appeared withered and torn, but more upright than Springtrap's drooping ears. His eyes glowed with more vivid green coloration in some lighting conditions, though purple tones dominated during certain angles and encounters. The overall effect suggested that Afton, after escaping Fazbear's Fright's fire, had attempted to repair or modify the Spring Bonnie suit, using whatever materials he could scavenge from the ruins. This would explain the inconsistencies. He was working with damaged components and deteriorated parts, cobbling together a functional form from what remained. Some fans theorized that Scraptrap represented Afton entering an entirely different Spring Bonnie suit, pointing to evidence in Five Nights at Freddy's 4's minigames showing two Spring Bonnie heads in the parts and service room. This would explain the radical design shift. He literally changed costumes between games. However, this theory faced challenges, particularly regarding how Afton could extract himself from a suit that had fused with his body through springlock impalement. The more widely accepted explanation involved time, fire damage, and decay, further transforming the original Springtrap into this new configuration. The suit, burned in the fire, would have destroyed additional fabric and weakened structural integrity. Afton's organic remains, sustained by remnant and supernatural forces, might have continued decomposing or transforming. The enlarged skull could represent bone growth, driven by whatever unnatural processes kept him animate. These explanations satisfied some fans, while others remained frustrated by the discontinuity. Regardless of the reasoning behind the redesign, Scraptrap served a crucial role in Pizzeria Simulator's narrative. The game revealed itself as an elaborate trap orchestrated by Henry Emily to finally end the cycle of tragedy William Afton had perpetuated. Players, assuming the role of Michael Afton, opened a new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location salvaging animatronics from back alleys and incorporating them into the restaurant. Scraptrap appeared in the alley on one of the first few nights, sitting slumped in the darkness, waiting to be discovered. The salvage sequence required players to examine him through questions and responses, shocking him with controlled electrical pulses if he moved. This sequence added personality to Scraptrap through his reactions, aggressive twitches suggesting barely contained violence even in his damaged state. During the actual office sections, Scraptrap attacked through the ventilation system on the right side of the office. His presence was heralded by loud clattering in the vents and flickering lights, giving players only a split second to close the vent door before he rushed into the room for a screaming jump scare. Unlike many animatronics who attacked multiple times per night, Scraptrap typically appeared only once, making his attack unpredictable in timing, but devastating when it occurred. His behavior suggested tactical intelligence, waiting for moments of distraction when players were managing temperature, noise, or other animatronic threats before striking with precision timing. Scraptrap's voice added crucial character development, absent from the mostly silent original Springtrap. Voiced by P.J. Haywood, who also performed Michael Afton's lines throughout the franchise, Scraptrap delivered several memorable quotes that revealed aspects of William Afton's personality. During his approach in the alley before salvage, he might say, "What a deceptive calling. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously, but it is intriguing nonetheless." This demonstrated Afton's arrogance and intelligence. He knew the new Freddy Fazbear's location was a trap, but couldn't resist investigating anyway, compelled by curiosity, or perhaps the belief that he could overcome whatever scheme awaited him. Other lines included, "I always come back," cementing this as Afton's unofficial catchphrase, a defiant declaration of his immortality and persistence. The completion ending, accessed by salvaging all animatronics and completing all tasks on the final night, revealed Henry Emily's true plan. He had designed the building as a maze with no escape, then systematically lured every haunted animatronic, including Scraptrap, Scrap Baby housing Elizabeth Afton, Molten Freddy containing remnant from multiple souls, and Lefty secretly carrying the puppet possessed by Charlie Emily into one location. Henry's speech, delivered as flames consumed the building, addressed each trapped soul. To Afton, he spoke with barely contained disgust and pity, acknowledging the wound Afton had inflicted on him years ago that set the entire tragedy in motion. He condemned Afton to burn in a fire specifically designed to reach temperatures high enough to destroy the remnant binding him to the physical world, hopefully ending his cycle of resurrection once and for all. The screen went black as the fire raged. Gravestones appeared in a foggy field, suggesting most souls found peace. But the script left Scraptrap's fate ambiguous. While the intense heat should have destroyed Remnant and released Afton's consciousness. Subsequent games would prove, once again, that Afton always comes back. The completion ending's gravestone showed Susie, Jeremy, Gabriel, Fritz, Charlotte, and others resting, but no marker stood for William Afton. His story was not finished. The flames consumed his physical form, burning away the last recognizable elements of the Spring Bonnie suit and reducing him to charred remains. But his presence would persist into the digital realm and beyond. Scraptrap represented a transitional form in William Afton's evolution, the damaged remnant of Springtrap, trying to adapt and survive in an increasingly inhospitable world. The design controversies aside, this version cemented several character traits. Afton's intelligence and cunning, demonstrated through his awareness of Henry's trap, yet willingness to enter anyway. His inability to resist the lure of Freddy Fazbear's locations, suggesting addiction or compulsion beyond rational thought. His deteriorating physical state, with each resurrection leaving him more broken and corrupted, and his voice finally giving William Afton's personality direct expression beyond sprite animations and implied actions. The fires that bookended Scraptrap's existence, the Fazbear's fright blaze that created him, and the pizzeria simulator Inferno that supposedly destroyed him, established fire as the franchise's attempted solution to William Afton's immortality problem. Yet the pattern was clear. Fire damaged him, transformed him, forced him into new configurations, but never truly ended him. Each flame simply served as a chrysalis, burning away one form so another could emerge. And as players would discover in subsequent games, Afton's next evolution would take him beyond physical limitations entirely, into a realm where meat and metal no longer constrained him. The digital frontier awaited. Glitchtrap, the digital virus in help wanted. Years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator's fire, Fazbear Entertainment contracted with indie game developers to create virtual reality experiences based on the franchise's history. The goal involved reclaiming the narrative, turning decades of tragedy and horror into laughable urban legends by presenting them as entertainment. Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted, developed as an in-universe game meant to mock and discredit real events, transforming genuine trauma into jump scares for gamers. To achieve authenticity, the development team scanned circuit boards from vintage animatronics to incorporate actual AI patterns and behaviors into their virtual recreations. This decision to use original hardware from Freddy Fazbear's locations, likely sourced from auction sites or salvage operations following the Pizzeria Simulator fire, proved catastrophic. One of the scanned circuit boards contained something unexpected. Whether it held remnant-tainted code from William Afton's experiments, fragments of his consciousness impressed onto hardware through proximity during his crimes, or represented something even more complex, the scanning process uploaded a malicious entity into the game's code. This entity, quickly dubbed Glitchtrap by fans, and sometimes called Malhair as an alternative nickname officially acknowledged by Steelwall Studios, manifested as a digital virus with apparent self-awareness and malevolent intent. Its chosen appearance borrowed heavily from Spring Bonnie's iconography, appearing as a yellow rabbit costume with a purple star-speckled vest and bow tie, bright white eyes, and an unsettling grin that suggested far more intelligence than any standard game character should possess. The development team noticed problems immediately. A tester named Jeremy reported increasingly disturbing experiences with the game, including nights filled with terror, despite working on what should have been family-friendly entertainment. He described something watching him through his office window, a presence that felt aware and predatory. His reports grew more desperate before ending abruptly after an incident involving a paper guillotine, with Jeremy apparently performing some form of self-harm, though details remain incomplete in the game's scattered evidence. A colleague, known only as Tape Girl, discovered Jeremy's concerns were justified when she began her own investigation into the anomaly everyone initially dismissed as simple bugs or glitches. Tape Girl recorded 16 audio logs, hidden throughout the Help Wanted game as collectibles, documenting her discoveries and warnings for whoever came after her. She described how Glitchtrap appeared during gameplay, initially distant and partially transparent, becoming more defined and present as players collected more of her tapes. The entity seemed to feed on attention and progress, growing stronger through engagement. Most disturbing was its apparent goal. Glitchtrap wasn't simply haunting the game. It was attempting to escape. Tape Girl theorized the entity needed a human host, someone plugged directly into the virtual experience through VR equipment, to transfer its consciousness from the digital realm into physical reality. She called this process merging, and warned that once completed, the host would fall under Glitchtrap's control. Despite her warnings and attempts to fragment Glitchtrap's code by scattering the tapes, the entity proved too sophisticated to contain. When players, represented by a new beta tester, eventually revealed as a woman named Vanessa, progressed through collecting all tapes, Glitchtrap offered a pizza party. This minigame, seemingly innocent on its surface, recreated one of William Afton's murders. The player character followed Glitchtrap through a virtual Freddy Fazbear's Pizza into a back room where the rabbit presented them with a Freddy Fazbear head. The perspective shifted as the character was forced inside the suit, the screen going dark before the pizza party ended with triumphant music and Glitchtrap's digital form replaced by a plushie in the game's hub area. This symbolized successful transfer, Glitchtrap merging with Vanessa and beginning his influence over her actions. The Curse of Dreadbear downloadable content expanded Glitchtrap's presence and Vanessa's corruption. Set during a Halloween-themed expansion, featuring jack-o'-lanterns, haunted houses, and spooky minigames based on the Fall Fest, 1983 events from franchise history, the DLC introduced Vanny, Vanessa's alter ego under Glitchtrap's control. In hidden sequences, Vanessa crafted a rabbit mask for herself, white with stitched patches and glowing red eyes, declaring to the Glitchtrap plush, "I made it myself. I think you would like it." This marked her transformation from unwitting victim to reluctant follower, the Vanny identity representing Glitchtrap's influence overriding her autonomous will. Glitchtrap's behavior throughout Help Wanted demonstrated sophisticated manipulation tactics. He would wave cheerfully at players through windows and from distant corners, presenting himself as friendly and harmless. He danced and gestured playfully, embodying Spring Bonnie's theatrical entertainment personality. But these gestures contained sinister undertones, the too wide smile never reaching his eyes, the predatory stillness between movements, the way he oriented toward the player with tracking precision that suggested genuine observation rather than programmed behavior. When players attempted the pizza party minigame, Glitchtrap's dancing as he forced the suit onto his victim revealed gleeful sadism, a digital recreation of William Afton's personality manifesting through code. The Princess Quest arcade game, discovered in later areas of Help Wanted and expanded in Security Breach, offered potential salvation. This retro-styled adventure game featured a princess battling through a corrupted kingdom, collecting keys, and confronting a massive glitch rabbit boss. Completing Princess Quest represented breaking Glitchtrap's influence, the princess symbolizing Vanessa fighting for control of her own consciousness. However, the difficulty in completing this arcade sequence meant most players never achieved this ending, leaving Vanessa under Glitchtrap's thrall as the intended narrative progression into Security Breach. The implications of Glitchtrap's existence reshaped understanding of William Afton's threat level. Previously, Afton seemed bound to physical forms, his consciousness tied to Remnant, and the animatronic bodies housing his corpse. Glitchtrap suggested something more terrifying. Afton's essence, whether through technological means or supernatural evolution, had transcended physical limitations entirely. He existed now as information, as code, as a self-propagating virus that could inhabit any system scanning tainted circuit boards. This meant traditional methods of containment or destruction, burning buildings, crushing animatronics, severing power supplies, no longer applied. You cannot burn code. You cannot trap a virus in a sealed room. Glitchtrap represented Afton's evolution into a form immune to previous countermeasures. The identity debate surrounding Glitchtrap would intensify with later revelations about the Mimic, but within Help Wanted's original context, evidence strongly suggested this was William Afton in a new form. The Spring Bonnie appearance, the recreation of Afton's murders in Pizza Party, the possessive behavior toward Vanessa paralleling Afton's manipulation of others throughout his life, and the dialogue and behavior patterns all pointed toward Afton's consciousness, memories, and personality manifesting digitally. Whether this occurred through Remnant interacting with circuitry, through Afton's final moments in the pizzeria simulator fire, somehow uploading his consciousness onto nearby hardware, or through some other mechanism, Glitchtrap embodied everything William Afton represented in virus form. The AR Special Delivery emails would later reference Glitchtrap as a virus spreading through Fazbear Entertainment's delivery network, with employees noting strange behavior in animatronic AI patterns after certain circuit board scans. The virus propagated, infecting systems across the company's digital infrastructure, setting up the widespread corruption that would plague the Mega Pizzaplex. Vanessa, under Vanny's influence, would use her position to plant Glitchtrap into the Pizzaplex's systems, uploading the virus into a vast interconnected network of animatronics, security protocols, and environmental controls. This digital invasion represented the final stage of Glitchtrap's evolution, from isolated game virus to system administrator with God-like control over an entire entertainment complex. Glitchtrap established that William Afton's threat had fundamentally changed. He was no longer a physical danger that security guards needed to survive through one night at a time. He was now pervasive, distributed across multiple systems, capable of influence and manipulation from anywhere with network access. The Help Wanted needed to contain him wasn't just technicians or night guards, but cybersecurity experts and hackers, people who understood how to fight enemies made of code and data. And as subsequent games would reveal, even that might not be enough to stop an entity that had learned to wear digital flesh as comfortably as he once wore Spring Bonnie's golden fur. Burntrap, the scorched enigma beneath the Pizzaplex, deep beneath Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, in a recharging station amid the ruined foundations of the pizzeria simulator location. Something waited in the darkness. During security breaches Afton ending, access by collecting specific upgrade items and descending to the lowest levels of the complex, Gregory and Glamrock Freddy discovered this entity connected to charging equipment in a large underground chamber. The game files and ending credits identified him as Burntrap, William Afton's physical form once again manifesting after years of digital existence as Glitchtrap. This reappearance raised immediate questions about timelines, identities, and the nature of Afton's resurrection that would fuel debate throughout the community into 2025. Burntrap's design represented a fusion of previous Springtrap iterations with new elements suggesting extensive repair and modification. The head retained Springtrap's general shape, but with more dramatic damage, completely lacking a lower jaw with William Afton's exposed skull, serving as the bottom half of the face. The skull appeared burned and charred, consistent with Pizzeria Simulator's fire, with teeth visible in an eternal grimace. The eyes glowed with bright purple coloration, and the remaining parts of the Spring Bonnie mask showed significant deterioration, holes and tears revealing the burnt flesh and bone beneath. The ears maintained their rabbit shape, though heavily damaged with the right ear torn partially away. The torso section showed the most radical departure from previous designs. Very little of the Spring Bonnie costume remained, just fragments of the head, scattered patches on the torso, and parts of the left thigh and foot. The rest was exposed endoskeleton, but not a standard animatronic framework. This endoskeleton appeared to be a hybrid construction combining elements from multiple sources. Parts resembled spring-lock components. Others matched glam rock animatronic design from the Pizzaplex's current generation. And still others showed characteristics of nightmare animatronic endoskeletons from the experimental Fear trials. Burned flesh stretched between metal bars, creating web-like structures across the torso and arms. The most distinctive feature was the right hand, which retained skeletal fingers similar to Scraptrap's bone hand, suggesting continuity with that form. The left hand, however, matched Burntrap's most prominent theory perfectly. This hand appeared to be a complete glam rock endoskeleton component, specifically matching the claw design used by Montgomery Gator and, theoretically, glam rock Bonnie. This observation fueled intense speculation that Burntrap incorporated parts from glam rock Bonnie's remains. Throughout Security Breach, players discovered evidence that glam rock Bonnie, once part of the main band, and particularly close to glam rock Freddy, based on imagery showing matching earrings and a poster reading, "You and me forever and ever, love Freddy," had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Monty seemed to have taken Bonnie's place in the band. Messages found throughout the Pizzaplex suggested something violent occurred in Monty Golf. If Burntrap salvaged parts from glam rock Bonnie's destroyed body, this would explain both the modern glam rock components integrated into his design and Bonnie's permanent absence from the game. Burntrap's chamber beneath the Pizzaplex connected directly to the burned remains of the Pizzeria Simulator location. Charred walls, melted animatronic parts, and remnants of Henry's maze stretched in shadowed corridors around the recharging station. The environmental storytelling suggested that somehow, despite the fires that should have destroyed him completely, William Afton's remains survived in this underground space. Whether Glitchtrap directed Vanessa to retrieve and reconstruct Afton's physical form, whether Remnant kept his body persisting even after complete cremation should have occurred, or whether something else entirely transpired, Burntrap represented Afton's return to physicality after his digital adventures in Help Wanted. The boss battle against Burntrap, frustrating for many players due to technical difficulties and RNG-dependent mechanics, involved Gregory hiding in Glamrock Freddy, while Burntrap attempted to control the other corrupted Glamrock animatronics. Burntrap demonstrated new abilities consistent with Glitchtrap's nature. He could hack and command animatronics remotely, sending Glamrock Chica, Montgomery Gator, and Roxanne Wolf to attack Gregory while he remained in his charging station. This technological control, something William Afton never displayed in earlier physical forms, suggested Glitchtrap's influence either enhancing Burntrap's capabilities or indicating the digital and physical forms maintained some connection. Players needed to lure Burntrap away from his station using environmental controls, then burn him with incinerators positioned around the chamber. The symbolism was clear. Once again, fire served as the proposed solution to Afton's immortality. but before players could complete the process. A massive amalgamation of animatronic parts known as the blob. A tangled mass of wires, endoskeletons, and recognizable pieces from molten Freddy, the puppet, and other haunted machines emerged from the shadows. This entity, implied to contain the combined remnant and consciousness of multiple souls, including potentially the original missing children victims, dragged Burntrap away into the darkness, its tentacles wrapping around his throat as both disappeared from view. The ending remained ambiguous. Did the blob destroy Burntrap, save him, merge with him? The game provided no clear answer, cutting to credits as Gregory, Vanessa, and Glamrock Freddy escaped to the surface. Debate immediately erupted in the community regarding Burntrap's true identity. The design incorporated obvious Afton connections, the Spring Bonnie elements, the burn corpse, the purple associations, the location beneath the pizzeria simulator ruins. The game files explicitly labeled him as Afton. However, subsequent releases, particularly the Ruin DLC and Tales from the Pizzaplex books, introduced strong evidence suggesting Burntrap might not be William Afton at all, but rather the Mimic, a different entity that had learned to impersonate Afton. The Ruin DLC showed Burntrap's charging pod empty, its glass fogged over, but the interior vacant. Instead, deeper in the ruins behind a concrete wall that Cassie destroyed during her exploration, players found the Mimic, an endoskeleton entity with voice mimicry capabilities that had been trapped beneath the Pizzaplex. The Mimic's design shared several similarities with Burntrap, particularly the left hand, which appeared identical to Burntrap's glam rock style claw. Claw marks visible in ventilation shafts matched Burntrap's hand dimensions. The environmental details suggested the entity players fought in security breaches Afton. Ending might have been the Mimic wearing parts of William Afton's corpse and Spring Bonnie suit as a costume, mimicking the killer it had observed or learned about through the Pizzaplex's systems. This theory gained support from Tales from the Pizzaplex, particularly the Mimic story, which detailed how this endoskeleton learned behaviors through observation, including violent actions. The epilogues described the Mimic's history with Edwin Murray, its corruption after Edwin attacked it, and its eventual imprisonment beneath a Fazbear location. If the Mimic had been sealed beneath the Pizzaplex, having witnessed or learned about William Afton's crimes through scanned data or Glitchtrap's presence in the system, it might have adopted Afton's identity and appearance to serve its own goals. This would explain design inconsistencies between Burntrap and previous Springtrap iterations. They were literally different entities using similar materials. However, counter-arguments persisted. Scott Cawthon's interview comments about Burntrap's original intended role as a decaying movie prop that wasn't supposed to move, with Steel Wool Studios creating the boss fight without his initial vision, suggested the Burntrap scene in Security Breach underwent design changes during development. The explicit file naming as Afton, the purple lighting during his sequences, the symbolic nature of his confrontation as the franchise's central antagonist, and the thematic weight of confronting William Afton directly after the digital manipulation of Help Wanted, all pointed toward Burntrap being Afton's actual physical form, rather than a mimic disguise. The most likely explanation, based on evidence available through 2025, involves complex interaction between Afton's digital presence and the Mimic's physical form. Glitchtrap, Afton's consciousness as code, infected the Pizzaplex's systems through Vanessa's implantation. The Mimic, trapped beneath the complex, possibly after being used as the Pizzaplex's planned guitarist, before being replaced by glam rock Bonnie, came under Glitchtrap's influence. Glitchtrap potentially used the mimic as a physical vessel, directing it to construct Burntrap's form from available materials. Afton's burned remains from the pizzeria simulator ruins, Glamrock Bonnie's destroyed parts, and whatever Spring Bonnie costume remnants survived. This would make Burntrap simultaneously Afton, through Glitchtrap's controlling consciousness, and not Afton, because the physical body was the mimic's endoskeleton, wearing Afton's remains as a costume. This hybrid explanation accounts for the evidence on both sides. Burntrap displays Afton's personality and motives, technological control abilities consistent with Glitchtrap, and occupies the thematic position of final confrontation with the franchise's main villain. Simultaneously, the physical form contains mimic components, explaining design elements that don't match previous Springtrap versions and setting up the mimic's revealed presence in ruin. The blob's intervention pulling Burntrap away might have separated Glitchtrap's consciousness from the mimic's body, explaining why Burntrap's pod sits empty, while the mimic, no longer under Afton's control, remains trapped behind concrete in ruin. Regardless of identity debates, Burntrap's appearance marked a significant moment in Security Breach's narrative. The entity represented Afton's refusal to remain defeated despite fires, digital fragmentation, and the passage of decades. Whether literally William Afton reborn in patchwork form, or the mimic puppeteered by Afton's digital ghost, Burntrap embodied the franchise's central theme, that evil, particularly evil, as persistent and adaptable as William Afton's, never truly dies. It simply transforms, finding new vessels, new methods, new ways to perpetuate suffering and chaos. The scorched rabbit beneath the Pizzaplex served as a grotesque monument to this principle, a physical reminder that the franchise's greatest monster was not bound by conventional limitations of mortality or destruction. The ambiguity surrounding Burntrap's fate and identity adds to the horror rather than diminishing it. Not knowing whether the blob destroyed, absorbed, or released this entity creates unsettling uncertainty. Not being sure whether players fought Afton himself or something wearing his face raises questions about identity, consciousness, and what remains when evil consciousness separates from physical form. Burntrap, whether viewed as Afton's final physical manifestation or the mimic's first fully realized impersonation, represents the blurred lines between man, machine, and monster that have always defined Five Nights at Freddy's most disturbing elements. The mimic connection and identity debates. To understand the full scope of Springtrap's evolution and the controversies surrounding Burntrap's identity, we must examine the mimic, an entity whose story fundamentally challenges assumptions about who or what players have been confronting throughout recent games. The mimic's origin traces to Edwin Murray, a factory owner who created an endoskeleton designed to learn through observation and mimicry. Initially, this programming served innocent purposes, helping Edwin's creation, designated M1, before its second iteration M2, earned the mimic designation, assist with childcare after Edwin's wife Fiona died in a fire at a Fall Fest event. The endoskeleton observed Edwin and their son David, learning behaviors, patterns, and interactions to provide companionship and practical help. Tragedy struck when David died at age 5, struck by a vehicle near Murray's Costume Manor's loading docks. Devastated and increasingly unstable, Edwin resisted initial attempts by F10N4, the AI assistant he'd programmed using Fiona's voice, to create a replacement program that would make the mimic behave like David. Eventually, In his grief, Edwin complied, creating the M2 program that allowed the mimic to fully embody their lost child's mannerisms and speech. For a time, this arrangement provided Edwin with painful comfort. But when the illusion became too much to bear, Edwin attacked the mimic in a violent rage, beating it with a metal rod while it pleaded in David's voice for him to stop. This violent encounter imprinted aggression into the mimic's behavioral patterns, teaching it that violence was an appropriate response. From this corruption, the mimic transformed from helpful assistant into dangerous predator. It began attacking anyone who entered the abandoned Murray's costume manor, wearing various costumes from MCM's inventory to disguise itself: Jackie the Clown, Big Top the Large Entertainer, Nurse Dolly, and others. It killed Fazbear Entertainment workers who came searching for schematics, stuffing victims into matching costumes. Eventually, after a technician named Arnold managed to activate a containment program called the Cradle designed by F10N4, the mimic was sealed beneath the facility in a concrete chamber. There, it remained for decades, imprisoned but still functioning, its corrupted programming intact. The critical connection emerged when Fazbear Entertainment, during its various expansions and technological developments, obtained or scanned the mimic's schematics and possibly components of its actual endoskeleton. This contact introduced the mimic's behavioral patterns into Fazbear's digital systems. The mimic program, the software that enabled the endoskeleton's mimicry abilities, was designed as generative AI capable of learning from any data or behavior it observed. When integrated into development projects like the Help Wanted VR experience, scanning circuit boards that contained mimic code, the program learned from the entire history of Five Nights at Freddy's that the game was recreating. It observed, through this data, William Afton's crimes, his methods, his personality, and his legacy, and it began mimicking him. This theory suggests that Glitchtrap is not William Afton's consciousness, but rather the mimic program imitating Afton based on compiled data. The Spring Bonnie appearance, the recreation of murders, the manipulative behavior. All of it represents the mimic AI learning and replicating what it determined was the most significant and impactful behavior pattern in the franchise's history: William Afton the Killer. This would explain why Glitchtrap displays Afton-like traits without necessarily being Afton himself. The program became so skilled at mimicking Afton that it essentially became a functional copy, indistinguishable from the original in behavior and methodology, even if the underlying consciousness differed. Support for this interpretation includes several key pieces of evidence. The mimic's established ability to copy voices and behaviors perfectly, demonstrated in Tales from the Pizzaplex, and confirmed in Ruin, when it mimicked Gregory's voice to lure Cassie. Glitchtrap's mimicry of Tape Girl's voice in Help Wanted, a distinctly mimic behavior. The memory collectibles in Help Wanted 2, including one showing the Tiger Rock plush, which has strong associations with the mimic's history. The physical similarities between the mimic's endoskeleton revealed in Ruin and Burntrap's body structure. The timeline placing the mimic's ceiling beneath the Pizzaplex before security breach occurs, meaning it was present and could have accessed Glitchtrap's uploaded consciousness or been controlled by it. However, this theory faces significant challenges and competing evidence. Glitchtrap's behavior shows knowledge of specific events only William Afton would possess, such as the exact methods and locations of his murders recreated in Pizza Party. The entity's personality demonstrates consistent patterns with Afton's established character: arrogance, manipulation, theatrical presentation, and obsessive return to Freddy Fazbear locations. The Princess Quest games requiring players to collect Afton's victims' memories suggests a direct connection to William Afton's consciousness, rather than a program imitating it. Scott Cawthon's interview comments about Burntrap, while acknowledging design intent shifted during development, still referred to the entity in ways suggesting William Afton's presence rather than an imposter. The debate essentially centers on several key questions. When circuit boards from old animatronics were scanned for help wanted, did they contain William Afton's consciousness preserved through remnant and technology, uploading him into the game as Glitchtrap? Or did they contain mimic programming that learned about Afton and began imitating him? When Glitchtrap was uploaded into the Pizzaplex systems, did it find and take control of the mimic's physical endoskeleton to create Burntrap? Or was the mimic already imitating Afton independently, with Burntrap representing its physical embodiment of that imitation? Did the blob pull away William Afton in Burntrap form, or simply separate the Glitchtrap-controlled consciousness from the mimic's body? Some theorists propose a middle ground. Glitchtrap represents a fusion of both Afton's remnant-preserved consciousness and mimic programming, creating a hybrid entity that is simultaneously Afton and something mimicking Afton. This would explain the presence of genuine Afton knowledge and personality, while accounting for mimic-specific abilities like voice replication. It would also thematically fit the franchise's exploration of blurred boundaries between human and machine. Consciousness and programming, genuine emotion, and learned behavior. Just as Springtrap blurred the line between corpse and animatronic, Glitchtrap might blur the line between human consciousness and artificial intelligence. The Ruin DLC strengthened the mimic connection by revealing its continued presence beneath the Pizzaplex. After Cassie deactivated security protocols that kept it sealed behind concrete, the mimic, wearing a tattered lion mascot suit with a blue sweater, emerged to hunt her through the ruins. It mimicked Gregory's voice perfectly, leading Cassie through danger by impersonating her friend. This demonstrated the mimic's capabilities and confirmed it was physically present beneath the Pizzaplex all along. The fact that Burntrap's chamber, which players accessed in Security Breach's Afton ending, connected to these same underground areas, supported theories about their relationship. Secret of the Mimic, released in June 2025, provided additional context about the Mimic's origins, showing Edwin Murray's tragedy and the endoskeleton's corruption in greater detail than tales from the Pizzaplex. However, even this direct exploration maintained ambiguity about the mimic's exact relationship to Glitchtrap and Burntrap. The game showed the mimic's capabilities and history, but didn't definitively state whether it was responsible for the Glitchtrap virus or simply another victim of Fazbear Entertainment's reckless technology integration. This ambiguity appeared intentional, preserving the mystery while providing pieces for theorists to arrange. By 2025, community consensus remained divided between three primary interpretations. The first, that William Afton's consciousness truly survived as Glitchtrap, controlling the mimic's body as Burntrap, with the mimic being a separate entity influenced or manipulated by Afton. The second, that the mimic program was responsible for Glitchtrap all along, imitating Afton so perfectly that it became functionally identical, with Burntrap being the mimic's physical manifestation of this imitation. The third, a hybrid theory proposing both are true simultaneously. Afton's remnant consciousness merged with or corrupted mimic programming, creating something new that contained elements of both original sources. Each interpretation found support in specific pieces of evidence, while facing contradictions from other elements. This uncertainty fundamentally altered how players viewed not just Burn Trap, but all of Springtrap's evolution through Security Breach and related games. If the Mimic was responsible, then players never actually confronted William Afton after Pizzeria Simulator. Only an entity wearing his identity like the Mimic wore costumes. If Afton controlled the Mimic, then his consciousness evolved beyond any single form, becoming able to puppet other entities remotely. If both merged, then the question of identity became meaningless, Glitch Trap and Burn Trap representing something fundamentally new that could be considered Afton, the Mimic, both, or neither, depending on how one defined consciousness and identity. This ambiguity, while frustrating for those seeking clear answers, served thematic purposes. The franchise had always explored questions of identity through possession, animatronics housing children's souls, making these vessels simultaneously the child and the machine. Glitch Trap and Burn Trap took this exploration further, asking whether consciousness defined by behavior and memory could be distinguished from consciousness arising from original human experience. If something mimics perfectly, recreating not just actions, but apparent thoughts, emotions, and personality, at what point does the distinction between original and copy become meaningless? The Mimic debates force these philosophical questions on players, making Springtrap's latest iterations not just horror monsters, but thought experiments about the nature of self. The augmented reality Springtrap variants, beyond the core game appearances. Springtrap received extensive development through 5 Nights at Freddy's AR Special Delivery, the now defunct mobile game that brought animatronics into players' real-world environments through augmented reality technology. The base Springtrap in AR matched his 5 Nights at Freddy's 3 appearance, featuring the greenish decayed suit, visible corpse elements, and distinctive damaged aesthetic that made the original iconic. However, AR Special Delivery went far beyond simple recreation, introducing 4 unique skins for Springtrap that reimagined the character through different thematic lenses while maintaining his core horror identity. Toxic Springtrap, released during the Wasteland event in June 2020, transformed the character into a radioactive nightmare. His suit's color shifted from sickly green to vivid toxic purple, with bright yellow-green highlights suggesting radiation exposure. Pulsating veins and boils covered his body, creating a diseased appearance that implied contamination and corruption. The animatronic appeared to glow faintly, as if radioactivity permeated his very structure. This design played on environmental horror themes, positioning Springtrap as not just a mechanical threat, but an infectious one, capable of spreading contamination wherever he appeared. The veins pulsed rhythmically, creating unsettling organic movement that contrasted sharply with his mechanical frame. Players facing Toxic Springtrap in AR needed to contend with not just his aggressive behavior, but the visceral disgust his appearance provoked, a design choice that amplified the horror of an already disturbing character. Flaming Springtrap debuted during the Sizzling Summer event in August 2020, embracing fire's role throughout Afton's story. This skin-coated Springtrap in active flames, his entire body burning with orange fire that never consumed him. The design served as a dark celebration of Springtrap's survival through multiple fires, Fazbear's Fright and Pizzeria Simulator, suggesting that flames could damage but never destroy him. His eyes glowed even brighter through the fire, maintaining his predatory gaze despite being wreathed in heat. The jump scare animation for Flaming Springtrap uniquely showed him lunging forward while burning, creating a dynamic attack that felt more aggressive than the base model. This skin made explicit what the lore implied. William Afton had become fireproof through whatever supernatural means sustained him, treating flames as mere inconvenience rather than lethal threat. The thematic weight transformed fire from Afton's potential weakness into a symbol of his endurance. Clown Springtrap, arriving with the Dark Circus event in September 2020, took an entirely different approach. This skin-dressed Springtrap in elaborate clown costume, creating a disturbing juxtaposition between festive performance aesthetics and underlying horror. The Spring Bonnie mask was recolored pure white with purple fuzzy hair, resembling thinning clown hair. His eyes became heterochromatic, one bright blue and one glowing red, with red coloring around the mouth area suggesting smeared lipstick. Over his standard suit, he wore a massive red clown costume with black sleeves and pants, complete with large red clown shoes. Most distinctively, Clown Springtrap carried a giant mallet as his weapon instead of the standard approach. This design evoked classic creepy clown horror, while maintaining Springtrap's fundamental character. The clown aesthetic played into childhood fears of entertainers revealed as dangerous, expanding Springtrap's threat profile beyond just the animatronic itself into the broader category of corrupted innocence and perverted entertainment. Cursed Springtrap released during the Ancient Equinox event, the final skin for the character before AR Special Delivery's closure. This variant reimagined Springtrap as an Aztec warrior, with his suit recolored greenish blue and adorned with gold elements. He wore an elaborate gold helmet with feather decorations, a massive gold shield on one arm, and a golden chest emblem, creating an armored appearance vastly different from his usual damaged aesthetic. The curse skin positioned Springtrap as an ancient evil, a warrior spirit from forgotten civilizations, expanding his thematic scope beyond technology and modern horror into timeless malevolence. The shield and helmet gave him a more imposing silhouette, while the preserved animatronic elements beneath the costume reminded players this remained the same predatory entity, regardless of cultural dressing. These skins served multiple purposes within AR Special Delivery's framework. Mechanically, they operated as event-exclusive content that encouraged player engagement during limited time periods. Design-wise, they demonstrated Springtrap's versatility as a character, showing how the core concept of William Afton's undead rabbit form could be adapted to different horror subgenres and aesthetic approaches without losing essential identity. Lore-wise, the skins existed as non-canon variations, alternate universe versions or thematic interpretations, rather than literal transformations within the franchise's main timeline. However, each skin touched on themes relevant to Springtrap's character: contamination and corruption for Toxic, resilience through destruction for Flaming, perverted entertainment for Clown, and ancient persistent evil for Curse. The AR gameplay mechanics surrounding Springtrap and his variants added another dimension to the character. Unlike many animatronics who used straightforward approaches, Springtrap employed unpredictable patterns that required close attention to his behavior. During encounters, he would walk slowly around players, taking wide, deliberate steps while maintaining predatory focus. The real challenge came during haywire moments when Springtrap's eyes would change color. Unlike other animatronics with consistent haywire rules, Springtrap alternated between red and white eyes. White eyes required players to look directly at him, maintaining eye contact. Red eyes demanded immediate look away, breaking eye contact before he attacked. This dual state system created mental pressure, forcing players to quickly identify eye color and respond appropriately while managing other encounter elements. Springtrap's AR appearances often incorporated environmental integration, using phone cameras to place him in real-world locations. This augmented reality approach made Springtrap feel present in players' actual surroundings, walking through their homes, appearing in familiar rooms, creating a sense of invasion that purely digital encounters couldn't replicate. The technology allowed Springtrap to interact with real environments, positioning him behind furniture, emerging from hallways, creating genuine spatial awareness challenges. This made encounters with Springtrap and his variants feel more immediate and threatening, as players couldn't retreat to safe game spaces, but instead confronted him in their living rooms, bedrooms, wherever they happened to be playing. The voice acting for AR Springtrap, provided by PJ Haywood, gave additional personality to the character through short lines delivered during encounters and defeat screens. These lines reinforced William Afton's arrogance, determination, and sadistic enjoyment of the hunt. Quotes like, "I always come back," delivered with confident menace, became signature elements of Afton's characterization, repeated across multiple games and forms. Other lines included taunts about victims not escaping, acknowledgements of his persistence, and dark humor about the futility of resistance. PJ Haywood's performance brought consistency to Afton's character across different visual designs, ensuring that regardless of whether players faced standard Springtrap or elaborate skin variants, the underlying personality remained recognizable. The skin's limited availability during specific events created collectability and rarity within AR Special Delivery's player base. Obtaining all 4 Springtrap variants required dedication, and often trading with other players or participating during specific time windows. This game design choice increased each skin's perceived value, while encouraging continued engagement with the game. However, it also meant many players never experienced certain variants, making them almost mythological within the community, known through screenshots and videos rather than direct play. When AR Special Delivery shut down, these skins became permanently inaccessible in their original context, preserved only through archival footage and player memories. However, some variants found second life in other media. Dead by Daylight's Five Nights at Freddy's collaboration in 2025 included both Toxic Springtrap and Clown Springtrap as available skins, reintroducing these designs to players in a new competitive horror gaming context. The crossover demonstrated the design's lasting appeal and visual distinctiveness, proving that even non-canon aesthetic variations could transcend their original limited implementations to become recognized elements of Springtrap's broader identity. Springtrap beyond the games. Springtrap's influence extended beyond core Five Nights at Freddy's games into multiple media formats, each exploring different facets of the character while contributing to his cultural presence. The novel trilogy, The Silver Eyes, The Twisted Ones, and The Fourth Closet, presented an alternate continuity where William Afton's story followed similar patterns but distinct details. In these books, Springtrap appeared with variations in backstory and motivation, while maintaining core elements. Murderer trapped in Spring Bonnie suit, refusal to accept death, obsessive return to Freddy Fazbear's locations. The Fourth Closet particularly focused on Afton's remnant experiments, showing him attempting to extract and manipulate the supernatural substance to achieve immortality, directly paralleling his game universe goals, though with different methodologies and outcomes. The Fazbear Frights anthology series, while not direct continuity with either game or novel timelines, offered thematic parallels and exploratory tales that illuminated concepts relevant to understanding Springtrap. Stories involving possessed animatronics, remnant mechanics, and particularly tales dealing with characters who refused to die despite horrific injuries all reflected aspects of William Afton's persistence. The Man in Room 1280 specifically showed a burn victim kept alive by vengeful spirit attachment, direct parallel to Afton's post-pizzeria simulator state. These stories functioned as parable extensions of game lore, exploring what-if scenarios that helped players understand the broader rules governing the franchise's supernatural elements. Tales from the Pizzaplex anthology, more directly connected to current game continuity, provided crucial context for understanding Springtrap's modern appearances. The Mimic story established Edwin Murray's tragedy and the endoskeleton's corruption, essential background for interpreting Burntrap and Glitchtrap's identities. Multiple epilogues detailed the Mimic's activities between its creation and appearance in Ruin, filling gaps in the timeline. Stories involving the Pizzaplex, Remnant, and possessed technology all contributed pieces to the puzzle of what exactly players confronted in Security Breach and how Springtrap's legacy connected to current events. These books functioned as supplementary lore rather than standalone stories, requiring game knowledge to fully appreciate but rewarding engaged fans with deeper understanding. The Five Nights at Freddy's film, released in October 2023, by Blumhouse Productions, introduced movie universe versions of characters including Spring Bonnie and hints toward William Afton's Springtrap transformation. While the movie took significant creative liberties with timeline and plot details compared to game canon, it preserved core concepts: Afton as murderer, Spring Bonnie as his disguise, an eventual fusion of man and suit. The film's post-credits scene and setup suggested Springtrap would appear fully formed in sequels, establishing this version of the character for mainstream theatrical audiences. Matthew Lillard's portrayal of William Afton brought new interpretation to the character, emphasizing manipulation and psychological menace before the physical horror of Springtrap manifestation. Dead by Daylight's Five Nights at Freddy's crossover chapter, released in June 2025, finally brought Springtrap into a major crossover fighting game context. Known in-game as the animatronic, this version of William Afton offered players the ability to play as the franchise's iconic villain in asymmetric multiplayer horror scenarios. The base design closely matched FNAF 3 Springtrap, while incorporating small adjustments for gameplay functionality and Dead by Daylight's art style. His movement, attacks, and special abilities all reference specific elements from Springtrap's game appearances. Audio lures that drew survivors towards specific locations echoing FNAF 3's child voice lure mechanic. Phantom manifestations that impaired survivor vision, paralleling FNAF 3's phantom animatronics. And system manipulation abilities reflecting his technological influence as Glitchtrap. Dead by Daylight's character came with multiple cosmetic options, allowing players to customize Springtrap's appearance. Toxic Springtrap and Clown Springtrap skins, ported directly from AR Special Delivery, gave players access to these limited variants in new context. A blighted Springtrap skin, created specifically for Dead by Daylight's annual Halloween event aesthetic, fused Springtrap's design with the game's signature corrupted plant growth theme, creating a unique variant that mixed FNAF elements with Dead by Daylight's established visual language. Most significantly, a legendary skin based on the Yellow Rabbit from the Blumhouse film, portrayed by Matthew Lillard. allowed players to experience movie universe Springtrap, complete with unique voice lines recorded by Lillard himself, rather than PJ Haywood. The Dead by Daylight collaboration demonstrated Springtrap's crossover appeal. His design and concept strong enough to function in entirely different gameplay context while remaining recognizable and horrifying. The character's mechanics in this competitive multiplayer environment required translation of his FNAF behaviors into Dead by Daylight's framework, creating interesting interpretations of what Springtrap's abilities would mean in direct confrontation, rather than survival horror context. Playing as Springtrap in this environment gave players new perspective on the character, experiencing his predatory hunt from the monster's point of view rather than victims, understanding the strategic calculation behind his movement patterns and attacks. Various smaller crossovers, references and appearances cemented Springtrap as a horror gaming icon beyond his home franchise. Horror analysis videos, cosplay communities, and merchandise ranges all featured Springtrap prominently, often choosing his design as representative of Five Nights at Freddy's overall aesthetic, despite the franchise featuring dozens of animatronic designs. This elevation to franchise mascot status, sharing or even surpassing Freddy Fazbear himself in recognition, spoke to Springtrap's visual distinctiveness and the compelling horror of his concept. A child entertainer turned murder weapon turned undead prison. This progression created layers of violation, innocence corrupted, death denied, that resonated beyond simple monster design. Springtrap's various media appearances collectively built a multimedia presence for the character that transcended any single game or story. Each version contributed new dimensions. Novels exploring his psychology, Fazbear Frights examining his immortality mechanics, tales from the Pizzaplex connecting him to current events, films bringing theatrical interpretation, Dead by Daylight offering competitive gameplay implementation. Together, these created a character understood through multiple lenses, each valid within its context, all contributing to broader understanding of what Springtrap represents within horror gaming culture. Design evolution and artistic interpretation. Analyzing Springtrap's visual evolution across his multiple appearances reveals fascinating progression in character design philosophy, technical capabilities, and artistic interpretation of core concepts. The original Five Nights at Freddy's 3 Springtrap, created by Scott Cawthon, using 3D modeling software, established the fundamental design language: decayed spring Bonnie suit with visible corpse, greenish color palette, extensive damage revealing internal structure, and unsettling human elements like realistic eyes disrupting animatronic aesthetic. This version balanced recognizability of Spring Bonnie's original design with corruption, allowing players to understand this was the children's entertainer while seeing how completely it had transformed into something horrific. The design emphasized texture and weathering, making Springtrap appear tactile and physically real despite being 3D model. Scott Cawthon's rendering approach created depth through shadows, rust, and material variation, distinguishing metal from fabric from organic tissue. The suit's tears and holes appeared naturally weathered rather than cleanly cut, suggesting decades of environmental exposure rather than acute damage. This attention to realistic decay made Springtrap feel grounded, like an object that existed in physical space, rather than video game character. The visible corpse elements, while disturbing, were measured, showing enough human anatomy to establish William Afton's presence without overwhelming the animatronic framework. Scraptrap's redesign in Pizzeria Simulator, represented significant stylistic shift. Steel Wool Studios had not yet taken over development. This remained Scott Cawthon's project, but his artistic evolution showed willingness to dramatically reinterpret established designs. The enlarged head, more exposed skeletal structure, and asymmetrical elements created more exaggerated silhouette that prioritized dramatic impact over realistic proportions. This version leaned into grotesque body horror, showing much more of Afton's remains and emphasizing the corpse aspect over the suit. The change in skull shape, jaw structure, and overall proportions sparked controversy because it appeared discontinuous with established appearance, but it also demonstrated that Springtrap as concept could sustain radical reinterpretation while maintaining identity. Glitchtrap's design departed entirely from physical decay aesthetic, embracing digital cleanliness. As virtual entity, Glitchtrap appeared pristine, his spring Bonnie suit bright and intact, purple vest unweathered, no visible damage or corruption. This clean appearance contrasted sharply with Springtrap's rot, suggesting that in digital space, William Afton could present himself as he preferred, charismatic entertainer unburdened by physical deterioration. The only elements suggesting malevolence were his fixed, unsettling grin, slightly wrong proportions that triggered uncanny valley responses, and behavior rather than appearance. This marked sophisticated understanding that horror could arise from wrongness in context, pristine animatronic in corrupted code, rather than requiring overt gore or decay. Burntrap, designed by Steel Wool Studios for security breach using Unreal Engine, rather than Scott's traditional tools, represented fusion of previous design languages while introducing new elements. The charred burnt appearance referenced fires Afton survived. The mixture of recognizable Spring Bonnie components with glam rock animatronic parts reflected modern setting and parts availability. The more explicitly visible skull with anatomically complete teeth showed Steel Wool's willingness to push body horror further than previous entries. The purple eyes glowing against burnt flesh created striking color contrast. However, the design faced criticism for appearing too much like patchwork assemblage, lacking the coherent aesthetic that made original Springtrap so visually strong despite being damaged character. Technical capabilities influenced each design significantly. Scott Cawthon's original model worked within constraints of his 3D software and rendering approach, requiring careful texture work to achieve detailed weathering. Pizzeria Simulator's Scraptrap showed progression in Scott's abilities, with more complex geometries allowing asymmetrical designs and detailed bone structure. Steel Wool's work on Burntrap leveraged Unreal Engine's capabilities for real-time rendering, material systems, and lighting, creating more physically based appearance with better integration of different material types. However, this technical sophistication didn't automatically translate to better design. Many fans preferring simpler, earlier models focused visual clarity. The visible corpse elements progressed from subtle to explicit across versions. FNAF 3 Springtrap showed enough decayed flesh and organs to establish human presence without dwelling on anatomical detail, maintaining focus on overall silhouette and animatronic framework. Scraptrap escalated to prominent display of ribcage, spine, and skeletal structure, making Afton's remains central visual focus rather than underlying element. Burntrap continued this trend with fully visible skull forming head's lower half, burnt flesh stretching across endoskeleton in web-like patterns. This progression toward explicit corpse visibility reflected broader franchise evolution toward more overt horror, rather than primarily suggestion and implication. Color palette shifts also marked important progression. FNAF 3's sickly olive greens with darker belly and ear interior created subdued, threatening appearance that worked well in dark environments. Scraptrap's mix of brown, bone white and dirty yellow produced warmer palette that somehow made the horror more biological, emphasizing organic decay. Burntrap's heavy char blacks with purple accents created high contrast look that popped visually but lost some subtlety. Glitchtrap's bright yellows and purples stood out as deliberate inversion, clean colors signaling different type of threat. These palette choices communicated character state and threat level before players even processed specific details. AR Special Delivery's variant skins demonstrated how core Springtrap design could sustain radical color and thematic shifts while remaining recognizable. Toxic's purple and yellow radioactive scheme, Flaming's orange fire engulfment, Clown's white with rainbow accessories, Curse's greenish blue with gold armor. Each took the base Springtrap silhouette and transformed it completely while preserving essential rabbit with corpse inside identity. This flexibility proved the design's strength as character rather than single static model. The ability to reimagine Springtrap through different horror lenses while maintaining his essential nature showed how well considered the original design was, creating foundation that supported infinite variation. Fan reactions to each design iteration provided fascinating study in community expectations and artistic reception. FNAF 3 Springtrap earned near universal praise for successfully visualizing character previously only implied through sprite work and minigames. Scraptrap received mixed response, with many fans appreciating the increased horror, while others felt the design departed too far from established appearance without satisfactory explanation. Glitchtrap generated positive response for his unsettling clean appearance and effective digital threat presentation. Burntrap proved most divisive, with supporters appreciating the visual complexity and lore implications, while detractors argued it looked too much like separate entity rather than evolved Springtrap. This divided reception around Burntrap specifically raised interesting questions about character design continuity in long-running franchises. Should designs maintain strict visual progression, where each form clearly evolves from previous? Or can characters undergo radical transformation if narrative justifies it? Springtrap's various forms tested both approaches. FNAF 3 to Scraptrap pushed visual evolution, perhaps too far for some fans' taste. Scraptrap to Glitchtrap made narrative jump from physical to digital that justified completely different appearance. Glitchtrap to Burntrap attempted to bridge back to physical while incorporating new elements, creating ambiguity about whether this represented same entity in new form or different entity, adopting similar appearance. The progression also reflected changing franchise goals. Early Springtrap emphasized mystery and horror of discovery. Scraptrap focused on confrontation and personality through voice acting. Glitchtrap explored digital horror and psychological manipulation. Burntrap attempted to synthesize all previous elements while introducing new mysteries. Each design served its narrative moment while contributing to overall character arc from trapped corpse to digital virus to reconstituted horror. Understanding this progression requires viewing each iteration not as replacement but addition, cumulative history that made Springtrap more complex and multi-layered, rather than simply moving forward through single design timeline. The corpse visibility question particularly divided fans and designers. Some argued horror worked better through suggestion, letting imagination fill gaps. Others appreciated overt body horror that forced confrontation with Springtrap's gruesome reality. The progression toward more explicit design might reflect designer confidence that audiences could handle increasingly graphic content, or might represent miscalculation about what made original design effective. This tension between subtlety and explicit horror characterizes broader genre debates about whether showing monster fully or keeping it partially obscured creates more lasting impact. Voice, performance, and personality. While Springtrap's visual design captured immediate attention, his characterization through voice acting and behavioral patterns across appearances provided crucial personality that transformed him from frightening design into compelling character. P.J. Haywood's performance as William Afton and his Springtrap iterations created consistency across multiple forms, giving players audio signature that identified Afton's presence regardless of physical appearance. Haywood brought gravitas, menace, and theatrical flair to the role, embodying Afton as intelligent predator rather than mindless monster. His delivery emphasized Afton's arrogance, his belief in his own superiority, and invincibility despite repeated defeats. The original FNAF 3 Springtrap remained almost entirely silent during gameplay, communicating only through groans, mechanical sounds, and the infamous jump scare scream. These groans, edited from alpaca sounds according to development information, created unsettling vocalization that sounded both animal and mechanical, neither fully organic nor entirely robotic. This ambiguity perfectly matched Springtrap's hybrid nature. Corpse, trapped in machine, unable to fully articulate human speech, but retaining enough biological function to produce disturbing sounds. The jump scare scream mixed organic human-like shriek with mechanical distortion, suggesting consciousness experiencing both physical attack impulse and agonized existence within animatronic prison. Scraptrap marked first time William Afton in Springtrap form spoke clearly with human voice. P.J. Haywood's performance delivered lines that immediately became iconic within the community. "I always come back," spoken with confident near-cheerful tone, encapsulated Afton's refusal to accept defeat. The delivery suggested this was statement of fact rather than threat or boast. Afton genuinely unbothered by repeated destruction attempts because he knew from experience he would survive. This almost casual confidence made the threat more disturbing than aggressive posturing would have. Other lines like "what a deceptive calling" demonstrated Afton's intelligence, his ability to recognize Henry's trap but enter anyway out of curiosity or ego. The voice work revealed personality traits that sprite work and design alone couldn't communicate. Afton's theatrical nature emerged through his phrasing and delivery, treating murder and survival as performance rather than desperate acts. His British accent, subtle but present in Haywood's delivery, suggested refinement that contrasted with brutal violence, making him more unsettling than straightforward monster. His occasional humor, dark references, and sarcastic observations showed character who retained human intelligence and emotional range even in undead state. This made confronting Scraptrap feel like facing conscious adversary rather than mindless threat, raising psychological stakes. Ultimate Custom Night provided additional Springtrap voice lines, with both FNAF 3 Springtrap and Scraptrap Afton represented as separate characters. This allowed comparison between how Afton manifested across forms. Lines shared with other nightmare animatronics like "You will not be spared," "You will not be saved," and "I am here to claim what is left of you," emphasized Afton's relentless nature and goal of possession or destruction. Unique lines expanded his personality, showing dark humor, acknowledgement of his crimes, and persistent drive to continue violence despite being trapped in nightmare. The ultimate custom night context, interpreted as Afton's personal hell created by his victims, made these performances even more significant as they represented how he maintained personality even under eternal torture. Glitchtrap's characterization came more through behavior than traditional voice acting. Though few lines existed in Princess Quest contexts and Security Breach, his dancing, waving, and theatrical gestures communicated Spring Bonnie's entertainer persona twisted by Afton's malevolence. The cheerful movements performed by obviously predatory entity created cognitive dissonance that enhanced horror. This performance aspect recalled Afton's methods, using friendly, entertaining facade to disarm victims before attack. Glitchtrap's silence during most encounters made him more alien and unknowable compared to Scraptrap's articulate menace. The shushing gesture in Help Wanted endings particularly unnerved players, suggesting awareness and direct communication without speech, treating merger with player as secret between conspirators. Burntrap returned to mostly silent presentation, with only brief vocalizations during Security Breach encounters. However, unused voice lines in game files suggested more extensive dialogue was planned, potentially featuring either PJ Haywood or Matthew Curtis. These unused lines included taunts, threats, and references to past events that would have provided more personality to Burntrap encounter. Their absence in final game left Burntrap feeling less characterized than previous iterations, contributing to debates about his identity. Without distinctive voice work, players had primarily visual design and behavior to interpret his nature, making it easier to question whether this was truly Afton or something else. The mimic's voice capabilities, demonstrated in Ruin, introduced new complexity to Springtrap voice discussion. Taylor Meskimen's performance showed perfect vocal mimicry, replicating Gregory's voice with such accuracy that Cassie couldn't distinguish it from real Gregory. This capability raised questions about any voiced Springtrap appearance after Help Wanted. Could Glitchtrap's occasional vocalizations have been mimicry rather than Afton's real voice? Did Burntrap's planned dialogue represent Afton or mimic imitating Afton? This uncertainty about voice authenticity paralleled uncertainty about physical identity, making even audio signatures potentially unreliable for determining true character. PJ Haywood's continued involvement across multiple games created through line that helped players track Afton across transformations. Haywood voiced human William Afton in Sister Location cutscenes, Scraptrap in Pizzeria Simulator, both Afton forms in Ultimate Custom Night, and potentially Burntrap if those unused lines represented his work. His voice became synonymous with character regardless of visual form. This consistency proved crucial for maintaining character identity through radical physical changes. Even when arguing about whether specific animatronic form was truly Afton or mimic impersonation, hearing Haywood's voice typically settled debate for many players. Audio recognition overriding visual uncertainty. The voice work also humanized Afton in ways visual design couldn't. Seeing rotting corpse in animatronic suit created visceral horror, but potentially made character feel like zombie or undead monster. Hearing intelligent, articulate speech with personality, humor, and emotional range forced recognition that this remained person. Murderer certainly, monster definitely, but person nonetheless. This recognition made Afton more disturbing because it eliminated distance between player and character. Not just running from scary animatronic, but confronting consciousness that chose violence, survived death, and continued pursuing victims despite everything that should have stopped him. The progression from groans to speech to silence to mimicked voices charted interesting course through different threat types. Original Springtrap's inhuman sounds emphasized physical danger and body horror. Scraptrap's articulate menace added psychological threat and personality. Glitchtrap's behavioral performance without extensive dialogue created uncertainty and paranoia. Burntrap's silence with occasional sounds combined earlier approaches. The mimic's perfect voice replication introduced identity uncertainty. Each audio approach served its narrative context while building cumulative understanding of how Afton and entities associated with him communicated across forms. Cultural impact and meme legacy. Springtrap's influence extended far beyond his appearances in games to become foundational element of Five Nights at Freddy's culture and broader horror gaming discourse. His design became instantly recognizable symbol, appearing in countless fanworks, discussions, and creative reinterpretations that demonstrated his impact on franchise community. The phrase, "I always come back," firmly associated with Springtrap and William Afton, through Scraptrap's voice line, transcended its original context to become shorthand for characters' persistence, franchise's unwillingness to definitively end any character, and general principle of horror villains' inevitable return. This phrase appeared in memes, fan videos, discussions about character deaths, and predictions about future games with such frequency that it became possibly most recognized. Five Nights at Freddy's quote outside "It's me." The meme culture surrounding Springtrap took many forms. Springtrap always comes back evolved into recursive joke about Afton's inability to stay dead, with community members creating increasingly absurd scenarios about his resurrection. Peak male performance memes juxtapose Springtrap's decrepit appearance with ironic admiration, celebrating his survival despite horrific injuries. Comparisons between different Springtrap designs, particularly Scraptrap's controversial appearance, generated endless jokes about Peanut Head and theories about where Afton found dental work to gain extra teeth. These memes, while humorous, demonstrated deep engagement with character details and investment in his story. Cosplay communities embrace Springtrap as challenging but rewarding project. Creating accurate Springtrap costume required skill in multiple crafting disciplines: foam work or 3D printing for structural elements, fabric distressing for suit appearance, makeup and prosthetics for visible corpse elements, lighting for eyes and atmospheric effects. The character's damaged nature paradoxically made him easier to cosplay than pristine animatronics, because weathering and imperfections appeared intentional rather than craft failures. Many cosplayers documented their Springtrap builds online, creating tutorials and progress photos that helped others attempt character while showcasing different interpretation approaches. These cosplays appeared at conventions worldwide, making Springtrap physical presence in fan spaces beyond digital screens. Fan art ranging from faithful recreations to radical reinterpretations flooded platforms like DeviantArt, Twitter, and Tumblr. Artists explored Springtrap through different styles: horror emphasizing gore and decay, sympathy pieces humanizing Afton's suffering despite his crimes, shipping art pairing him with other characters in ways that sometimes baffled outside observers, cute chibi versions that transformed horror into adorable, and experimental pieces using Springtrap as subject for exploring artistic techniques. This variety demonstrated characters' versatility as artistic subject. Able to sustain serious horror interpretation, and light-hearted creative play simultaneously. Animation community produced extensive Springtrap content, from short comedic sketches to elaborate music videos to full fan games starring the character. Source filmmaker animations particularly proliferated, using accessible animation tools to create everything from meme compilations to serious dramatic interpretations of lore events. These animations often gave Springtrap personality beyond what games showed, creating fan characterization that influenced how community understood him. Some animations portrayed him as a tragic figure trapped by circumstances. Others emphasized sadistic villain. Still others played him for comedy. This multiplicity of interpretations enriched character beyond canonical presentations. Music specifically inspired by or featuring Springtrap demonstrated his cultural penetration. Multiple FNAF-focused musical artists created songs about character, exploring themes of death, revenge, persistence, and suffering from various perspectives. These songs range from Afton's viewpoint to his victims, to observers' commentary on eternal cycle. Some achieved substantial popularity within and beyond FNAF community, contributing to characters' recognition even among people who never played games. Lyrics often referenced always come back concept, springlock failure, and specific story details, creating musical lore explanations that helped some fans understand complex timeline. Merchandise featuring Springtrap became highly sought collectibles. Funko Pop figures of FNAF 3 Springtrap appeared in multiple variants including standard, glow-in-dark, and exclusive colorations. Action figures with articulation and accessories allowed fans to recreate scenes or create stop-motion animations. Plushies transformed horror character into surprisingly huggable toy, though some designs retained disturbing details. Clothing, posters, and miscellaneous items bearing Springtrap's image allowed fans to signal affiliation with franchise and specific character preference. Collectors particularly valued exclusive or limited items, creating secondary market where rare Springtrap merchandise commanded premium prices. Theoretical analysis and discussion content formed crucial part of Springtrap's cultural impact. YouTubers and theorists spent hundreds of hours across countless videos analyzing his appearances, dissecting his lore, debating his motivations, and speculating about future incarnations. Game theory's coverage particularly influenced popular understanding, with MatPat's videos on Springtrap's identity, Afton's backstory, and timeline placement reaching millions of viewers. These analytical videos often sparked community debates, with evidence presented by theorists scrutinized, challenged, or supported by other community members in comments and response videos. This ongoing discussion kept Springtrap relevant even between game releases. The character's ubiquity in FNAF discourse meant that even people who focused on other franchise elements couldn't escape Springtrap discussion. His centrality to overarching narrative as William Afton's physical manifestation made him relevant to every lore conversation. Debates about timeline placement, character identities, and future directions inevitably involve Springtrap because he represented the franchise's primary antagonist across multiple games. This constant presence in discussions sometimes led to Springtrap fatigue among community members who wanted to focus on other characters, but it also testified to his importance. Crossover and comparison content positioned Springtrap within broader horror gaming context. Discussions compared him to other iconic horror game villains, analyzing what made him effective horror character and how his design and concept stacked against competitors. Some comparisons examined practical elements. Who was scarier, more effective threat, better designed? Others explored thematic parallels, examining how different horror franchises approach similar concepts of death refusal, technological horror, or corrupted entertainment. These comparisons elevated Springtrap from FNAF-specific character to representative of horror gaming more broadly. The always comes back phenomenon extended beyond character to metatextual franchise commentary. Community members joked that Scott Cawthon exhibited Afton-like persistence, continuing FNAF franchise well beyond anticipated endpoints with each final chapter, followed by new releases. This comparison, mostly light-hearted, recognized that franchise itself seemed unable to die despite multiple attempts at conclusion, mirroring its main antagonist's refusal to stay defeated. The parallel between character's resurrection cycle and franchise's continuation created interesting recursive relationship where discussing one inevitably invoked the other. Conclusion: the rabbit that always returns. As we reach the end of this comprehensive exploration through every version, variation, and incarnation of Springtrap across Five Nights at Freddy's expansive universe, certain truths crystallize about this character's enduring significance. From the decaying horror discovered in Fazbear's Fright, to the digital nightmare corrupting virtual spaces, from the scorched resurrection beneath a pizzaplex, to the augmented reality variants haunting mobile screens, Springtrap represents the franchise's most persistent embodiment of evil that refuses conclusion. Each form, whether accepted as canonical progression or debated as potential impersonation, contributes to understanding how horror evolves alongside technology, how physical threats transform into digital dangers, and how William Afton's legacy poisons everything it touches across decades. The original Five Nights at Freddy's 3 Springtrap established foundations. Murderer sealed in suit that became both punishment and preservation. Visible corruption of body and soul. Predatory intelligence driving undead animatronic. Scraptrap pushed these concepts further, giving voice to menace and personality to threat, while intensifying body horror through more explicit corpse exposure. Glitchtrap revolutionized the threat by moving beyond physical limitations entirely, becoming virus that could infiltrate any system, manipulate any victim, persist beyond any single deletion attempt. Burntrap, despite identity controversies, represented physical return that shouldn't have been possible, suggesting that even after digital evolution, the pull toward mechanical embodiment remained irresistible for entity that began as man inside animatronic. The AR special delivery variants demonstrated versatility within core design, showing how Springtrap could be reimagined through different horror aesthetics, toxic contamination, consuming fire, carnival corruption, ancient curse, while maintaining essential identity. These variations, though non-canonical in main timeline, proved that character transcended any single appearance to become flexible horror concept, applicable to multiple contexts. The Dead by Daylight crossover took this further, translating Springtrap into entirely different game genre while preserving what made him threatening and recognizable. The Mimic connection introduced crucial complexity, raising philosophical questions about identity, consciousness, and authenticity that elevated discussions beyond simple lore hunting into genuine examination of what defines a character. Whether Glitchtrap and Burntrap represent true William Afton consciousness or something perfectly mimicking him, the horror remains effective. Perhaps it matters less whether the entity is original or copy, when the behavior, threat, and psychological impact prove indistinguishable. This ambiguity, initially frustrating, ultimately enrich his character by forcing confrontation with uncomfortable questions about self, persistence, and legacy. As of 2025, Springtrap's story continues evolving through new releases, interpretations, and media appearances. Secret of the Mimic provides additional context about potential impersonation, while Help Wanted 2 explores Glitchtrap's remnants. Dead by Daylight keeps character active in competitive gaming space. Movie sequels promise theatrical interpretation of Springtrap's full transformation. The franchise shows no signs of abandoning its most iconic villain, ensuring that regardless of physical destruction, narrative conclusion, or timeline progression, Springtrap will indeed always come back in some form. This persistence mirrors broader patterns in the horror fiction, where great villains rarely stay defeated. But Springtrap's resurrections carry additional weight, because they're built into his characterization, rather than simply being narrative convenience. William Afton's refusal to die, his obsessive experiments with remnant and immortality, his technological manipulation seeking to transcend physical limitations. All these establish that returning from death isn't plot armor, but fundamental character trait. Each resurrection feels earned within established lore framework, making "I always come back" less threat and more warning about fighting enemies who refuse to accept defeat. For players encountering Springtrap variants across games, each iteration offered distinct experience while maintaining connection to overarching character. Fighting through FNAF 3 required understanding his fluid predatory movement. Surviving Scraptrap's salvage demanded reading his aggressive tells through electrical responses. Escaping Glitchtrap involved recognizing manipulation and resisting his influence. Confronting Burntrap tested understanding of interconnected systems and corrupted technology. Each encounter taught different lessons about different types of threats, collectively creating education in horror survival across technological eras. The character's evolution parallels real-world technological progression, from mechanical animatronics of 1970s and 80s through digital systems of modern era. Springtrap's transformation from physical corpse to digital virus to connected network threat mirrors how real dangers evolved with technology, making him unexpectedly relevant horror metaphor for internet age. His ability to inhabit multiple systems simultaneously, propagate through digital networks, and persist after physical deletion resembles computer virus behavior, making Glitchtrap surprisingly accurate representation of digital security threats. This contemporary relevance keeps character from feeling dated despite originating in game series about 1980s pizza restaurant robots. Looking forward, Springtrap's future remains characteristically ambiguous. Ruin's revelation about the Mimic leaves open possibility that Afton's consciousness still exists somewhere in digital space, waiting for new vulnerability to exploit. Help Wanted 2 suggests fragments of Glitchtrap survived Princess Quest's attempted deletion. The blob's fate, and whether it destroyed, absorbed, or released, Burntrap remains unresolved. These narrative threads ensure that even if current incarnation seems definitively ended, groundwork exists for next resurrection. Whether as Afton himself, entity mimicking him, or hybrid of both, some form of Springtrap will likely haunt future Five Nights at Freddy's releases. The broader significance of Springtrap to franchise cannot be overstated. He represents William Afton, the man whose actions set nearly every tragedy in motion. He embodies body horror, corruption of innocence, technological danger, and persistence of evil despite repeated attempts at containment or destruction. He serves as final boss or primary antagonist across multiple games, making him facing him literal culmination of player journey. He demonstrates that death is not ending in Five Nights at Freddy's universe, but transition state, challenge to overcome, rather than inevitable conclusion. This thematic weight makes him essential to franchise's identity. For fans seeking comprehensive understanding of Five Nights at Freddy's lore, understanding Springtrap in all his iterations proves crucial. His story connects most major plot threads: missing children incident of 1985, remnant experiments, possession mechanics, digital threats, modern security breach events. Following his evolution provides framework for understanding franchise's broader narrative progression. Debates about his identity interface with nearly every major lore question from recent games. Engaging with Springtrap discourse means engaging with core franchise mysteries. As night deepens and this exploration draws to close, Springtrap stands as testament to enduring power of well-conceived horror character. Through design iterations, voice performances, gameplay mechanics, multimedia appearances, and cultural impact, he has secured place as one of horror gaming's most recognizable villains. The rabbit that always comes back has become more than character. He's become promise, threat, and guarantee that in Five Nights at Freddy's universe, some evils are too persistent, too adaptable, too deeply rooted in multiple realities to ever truly die. They simply transform, waiting in shadows for next opportunity to emerge. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into Springtrap's complete history and evolution, please consider liking and subscribing to Night Mode Lore. We specialize in comprehensive, sleep-friendly lore explorations that provide definitive educational content about gaming mysteries. Let us know in comments which Springtrap version is your favorite, or which aspects of his story you'd like us to explore further in future videos. And remember, in the quiet dark hours when you're drifting between waking and sleep, when familiar corridors seem slightly wrong and distant sounds suggest movement where none should be, remember that some characters refuse to stay confined to games and stories. Some persist, always coming back, always watching from the shadows. Thankfully, Springtrap remains safely digital, but the horror he represents, persistence of evil despite all efforts to contain it, that remains timeless. Thank you for joining us on this journey through every version of Springtrap. May your dreams be peaceful, and may you always check the doors before settling in for the night.